Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Architect of His Own Ruin. James Reed had always been a builder, not of houses or monuments, but of quieter things: trust, stability, a life measured in mortgage payments and anniversary dinners at the same Italian restaurant where he'd proposed. For 17 years, he'd built a marriage with Christine Palmer, believing that his steady hands and reliable heart were enough foundation for forever. He should have noticed the cracks sooner. The advertising firm he'd poured his soul into for 2 decades downsized 6 months ago, and James's position as senior creative director became a line item on his severance package. Christine had smiled when he told her, the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes, and said all the right words about fresh starts and new opportunities. Within a week, she'd filed for divorce. The proceedings were surgical. Christine's attorney, a shark named Morris McElroy with teeth capped too white and a reputation for destroying men, tore through James's finances like cancer. The house, bought with James's inheritance from his grandmother, went to Christine. The savings account drained for her emotional suffering. The car, the furniture, even the goddamn espresso machine James had saved for months to buy. Your Honor, McElroy had said, adjusting his Rolex with theatrical precision, my client sacrificed her own career aspirations to support Mr. Reed's ambitions. She deserves compensation for those lost years. The lie was so brazen James almost laughed in court. Christine had quit her receptionist job after 3 months of marriage, claiming migraines. She'd spent the next 17 years perfecting her tennis serve at the country club James couldn't afford to join. The judge, a gray-haired woman who looked like she'd heard every story twice, awarded Christine 70% of everything. James walked out of the courthouse with his clothes, his grandfather's watch, and a checking account showing $247. That night, Christine had called him, not to apologize, not to express even a shred of remorse, to gloat. You'll die alone and broke, she'd said, her laughter sharp as breaking glass. That's what happens to men who bore me, James. You were always so adequate. Roger says I should have left you years ago. Roger. The name hit him like a fist to the stomach. Roger Clements, his former business partner, the man who'd stood as best man at their wedding, who'd eaten at their table every Sunday for 5 years. The man who'd voted to eliminate James's position when the firm downsized. James had hung up without responding. What was there to say? She'd already taken everything that mattered. Almost everything. He still had his plasma. Chapter 2. The Transaction. The donation center squatted between a pawn shop and a check-cashing place on the east side, the kind of neighborhood where desperation wore a familiar face. James had driven past it 100 times, never imagining he'd be the one walking through those doors. The waiting room smelled of industrial cleaner and defeat. A teenage mother bounced a crying baby on her knee. An old man with shaking hands filled out paperwork with painful slowness. A woman James's age stared at nothing, her eyes hollow. First time, the receptionist asked. Her name tag read Kara. She had kind eyes that had seen too much. That obvious? You're wearing a tie. She pushed a clipboard across the desk. Fill this out. We pay $40 for your first donation. $40. James had spent more than that on wine he couldn't taste the difference in. Now, it was 2 weeks of groceries if he shopped carefully. He took the clipboard to a plastic chair that wobbled on uneven legs and began filling in the blanks of his diminished life. The nurse who called him back was young, professionally cheerful in a way that felt rehearsed. I'm Emily, she said, leading him to a chair that looked like it belonged in a dentist's nightmare. Ever donated before? Never. No problem. I'll need to do a quick health screening, take some vitals, test your blood. The whole process takes about 90 minutes. She wrapped a blood pressure cuff around his arm. So what brings you in today? Rent, James said simply. Emily's professional smile softened into something genuine. I hear that. She drew 3 vials of blood with practiced efficiency. Okay, I'm going to run these to the lab. Back in 5. She wasn't. 15 minutes passed. Then 20. James watched the clock, watched the other donors cycle through their chairs, tubes connected like some dystopian assembly line harvesting human fluid for profit. When Emily returned, her face had changed. The color had drained from her cheeks, and her hands trembled slightly as she gripped his file. "Sir," she said, her voice carefully controlled, "I need you to stay right here. Don't move. I need to call someone." "What's wrong?" Ice flooded James's veins. "Cancer. HIV. Something terminal they'd found swimming in his blood." "Nothing's wrong. Just please wait." She disappeared into the back office. Through the window, James saw her on the phone, gesturing urgently. Two other staff members crowded around her, looking at something on her computer screen, then at James, then back at the screen. 20 minutes later, 3 men in suits rushed through the donation center doors like they owned the place. They moved with purpose, parting the crowd of donors without touching them, radiating authority and expensive cologne. The lead one was in his 60s, silver-haired, and imposing in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than James's last paycheck. His eyes found James and locked on with laser focus. He walked straight to James's chair, stopped, and stared. His face cycled through emotions: shock, disbelief, something that looked almost like relief. "After 32 years, he whispered, loud enough for James to hear, "we finally found you." Chapter 3. The Inheritance in His Veins. The man's name was Albert Riddle, CEO of Riddle Pharmaceuticals. The other two were lawyers, introduced quickly and forgotten immediately. They ushered James into a back office that the donation center clearly didn't know existed, all dark wood and leather that didn't match the fluorescent despair of the waiting room. "Mr. Reed," Albert said, settling into a chair across from James with the gravity of a man about to change someone's life, "I apologize for the dramatic entrance. But what we've discovered in your blood—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "It's nothing short of miraculous." "I have cancer," James said flatly. "What?" "No." Albert actually laughed. "Mr. Reed, you're possibly the healthiest person in this city. What you have is something we've been searching for since 1993. A genetic mutation so rare that our models suggested only 3 to 5 people on Earth possess it." He slid a folder across the desk. Inside were charts, graphs, genetic sequences that looked like abstract art. 32 years ago, my daughter was diagnosed with Herrmann syndrome. Do you know what that is?" James shook his head. "Didn't think so. It's so rare, most doctors never see a case. It's a degenerative neurological disorder that destroyed her nervous system cell by cell. She was 8 years old." Albert's voice cracked slightly. "We tried everything. Every treatment, every experimental therapy. She died in 1995, 2 months before her 11th birthday." "I'm sorry," James said, meaning it. "After her death, I dedicated my company to finding a cure. We discovered that the disease is caused by a specific protein deficiency. The human body can't produce the protein naturally, except in the rarest cases. People with a mutation on the HRNX4 gene." Albert tapped the folder. "People like you. I don't understand. Your plasma, Mr. Reed, contains antibodies that can not only treat Herrmann syndrome, but potentially cure it. There are currently 847 diagnosed cases in the United States alone. Worldwide, thousands. Children dying because their bodies can't produce what yours makes naturally." One of the lawyers leaned forward. "Mr. Reed, Riddle Pharmaceuticals is prepared to offer you a contract for exclusive plasma donation rights. We're talking twice-weekly donations, full medical care, and compensation of $15 million, Albert interrupted. $5 million signing bonus, $10 million paid out over 5 years. Plus royalties on any treatment developed using your plasma." The number didn't compute. James had been counting pennies that morning, calculating whether he could afford both electricity and food. "Why?" he managed. "Because you have something money can't buy. Because 847 families are praying for what's in your veins. And because," Albert's expression hardened, "because I won't let what happened to my daughter happen to anyone else if I can prevent it." James looked at the contract the lawyer slid in front of him. The numbers were real. The signatures were real. This was actually happening. "I need to think about it," he said. Albert nodded slowly. "I understand. Take 24 hours. But Mr. Reed, please understand. Every day we delay, Children are dying. They gave him a card, a phone number, and a check for $40 for his plasma donation. James walked out of the center in a daze. The contrast so surreal, he wondered if he'd imagined the entire conversation. His phone rang as he reached his car. A 15-year-old Honda that Christine's lawyer had deemed not worth fighting for. Frank Norton, his only real friend who'd survived the divorce. "James, where are you?" "I've been calling all morning." "Donating plasma," James said, the absurdity of everything hitting him at once. "Jesus. Listen, I heard something you need to know. I ran into Bridget Palmer at the grocery store. Christine's sister. The one who'd seemed sympathetic during the divorce. Who'd told James she thought Christine was being unreasonable. And she got drunk, started bragging. James, Christine, and Roger have been planning this for over a year. They wanted you out of the firm specifically so they could take your position and your shares. Roger's been promoted to CEO. They're selling the company to Whitmore Media next month for $16 million. Christine gets half because they've been partners the whole time." James's hand tightened on the phone. "She destroyed me for $8 million. There's more." Bridget said Christine specifically dragged out the divorce proceedings to drain your legal fund, make you desperate enough to accept her terms. She called it breaking you. Her words. The sun was setting, painting the parking lot in shades of red. James looked at the donation center, then at Albert Riddle's business card in his hand. $15 million. 847 dying children. And a woman who'd laughed while she destroyed him. "Frank," James said quietly, "I need you to do something for me. I need you to not tell anyone what I'm about to tell you. Can you do that?" "Of course." "Good. Because I'm about to become very wealthy. And Christine is about to learn what it costs to underestimate adequate men." Chapter 4. The Devil in the Details. James signed a contract at 9 a.m. the next morning in Albert Riddle's downtown office, a glass tower that looked down on the city like a benevolent god. The lawyers witnessed. The check cleared into his account with a digital efficiency that felt unreal, and just like that, James Reed was worth $5 million with 10 more on the way. "Welcome to Riddle Pharmaceuticals," Albert said, shaking his hand. "We'll start with comprehensive medical testing tomorrow. I want you under the care of our best people." "I appreciate that, but I have a request." Albert's eyebrows rose. "Go on." "I want my participation kept completely confidential. No press releases, no announcements. As far as the world knows, James Reed is still broke." "May I ask why?" James smiled for the first time in months. "Let's call it a social experiment." He left the building and drove straight to Frank's apartment, a modest two-bedroom where his friend had lived since his own divorce 3 years prior. Frank was waiting with coffee and the tactical mind that had made him invaluable in the Army before he'd become an accountant. "Okay," Frank said, spreading papers across his dining table. "I did some digging. Roger Clements doesn't just want a job. He wants to erase you. He's been telling everyone at the firm that you were deadweight, that you hadn't had a good idea in years. Creative revisionism. It gets better. I pulled the company's financial records. Don't ask how. The Whitmore Media deal? It's contingent on the firm showing growth. Roger's been cooking the books, attributing your projects to himself. The Kaufman campaign that won 3 awards isn't the records. The Riverside rebranding that brought in $2 million, also his. James studied the documents. Months of his work, his late nights, his creative bleeding, all credited to Roger Clements. He's also been feeding information to McElroy, Christine's lawyer. Every asset you try to hide, every financial move you made, Roger told them. They've been partners since the beginning. How long have they been sleeping together? Best guess, 2 years, maybe longer. Frank poured more coffee. Here's what I don't understand. Why go through all this? Roger's got money. Christine got most of yours. Why salt the earth? Because Christine doesn't just want things. She wants to win. James remembered their early years, the way she played tennis. Not for exercise, but to dominate. How she'd ended friendships over perceived slights. How she kept score in everything. Leaving me with nothing is the ultimate victory. So what's the play? James pulled out his phone, opened his banking app, and showed Frank the balance. $5,247. Frank's coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. What the hell? My blood is worth $15 million to a pharmaceutical company. They found a genetic mutation that can cure a rare disease. James smiled. Christine tried to leave me with nothing. She left me with everything. Okay, but what are you going to? I'm going to destroy them. Not with lawyers or court battles. I'm going to dismantle everything they've built, piece by piece, and I'm going to make them watch. Frank leaned back, a slow grin spreading across his face. I'm listening. Over the next 3 hours, they sketched out the framework. James would remain publicly broke, living in the cheap studio apartment he'd rented in a building that smelled of mildew and broken dreams. He continued to appear desperate, defeated. Meanwhile, he'd use his money to carefully, methodically destroy the foundations of Christine and Roger's empire. First, James said, I need information. Everything about their lives. Where's Roger vulnerable? Frank consulted his notes. He's got a gambling problem he thinks he's hiding. Poker games every Thursday at the Riverside Casino, consistently losing. He's into the house for about 60 grand. Good. What about Christine? She's expensive. Country club fees, spa memberships, that new Lexus. She's burning through the divorce settlement faster than anticipated. So they need the Whitmore media sale to go through. Desperately, James stood, walked to Frank's window. The city sprawled below, millions of people chasing their own small victories and defeats. Then we make sure it doesn't, James said. And we make sure they destroy themselves in the process. Chapter 5. Pawns and Players. The key to revenge, James learned, wasn't rage, it was patience. And capital. He started small. A shell corporation registered in Delaware under the name Norwood Ventures, managed by a corporate attorney who asked no questions as long as the retainer cleared. Through Norwood, James began acquiring debts. Roger's gambling markers were the first. $63,000 worth of bad bets, purchased from a casino for 70 cents on the dollar. Legal, clean, and suddenly James owned Roger's desperation. Don't call him, Frank warned when James suggested making contact. Not yet. Let him sweat. The casino's been patient, but Norwood Ventures doesn't have to be. Instead, James had the attorney send a polite letter demanding immediate payment. 45 days to settle the full amount, or legal action would commence. The second move was more elegant. James hired a private investigator named Marty Bishop, a former cop with a whiskey voice and a talent for finding what people wanted hidden. Marty's first assignment was simple. Document everything Roger and Christine did. Every lunch, every meeting, every indiscretion. They're not subtle. Marty reported 2 weeks later, sliding a folder of photographs across the table at the diner where they met. Country club lunches 3 times a week. She's wearing jewelry that costs more than my car. They're celebrating like they've already won. The photos showed Christine and Roger at the Riverside Country Club, champagne and oysters, laughing like teenagers. In one image, Christine wore a diamond bracelet that caught the afternoon light. James recognized it. She told him years ago it was her dream piece. $30,000 at Cartier. They're spending money they don't have yet, James observed. Counting chickens, Marty agreed. I also found something interesting. Christine's sister, Bridget Palmer? She's not as loyal as Christine thinks. Explain. She's got her own money problems. 3 credit cards maxed out, behind on her mortgage. And she's bitter. Feels like Christine got everything while she got nothing. The divorce settlement, the house, the car. Bridget's one conversation away from spilling every secret she knows. James smiled. Then let's have that conversation. Bridget Palmer lived in a townhouse in the suburbs, the kind of place that looked nice from the street, but had an air of quiet desperation in the details. The overgrown lawn, the faded paint, the decade-old minivan with a cracked windshield. James knocked on her door on a Tuesday morning, armed with coffee and an offer. She answered in yoga pants and a stained sweatshirt, her hair pulled back. James? What are you doing here? I wanted to thank you for what you told Frank. About Christine and Roger's plan. Bridget's face went pale. I was drunk. I shouldn't have said anything. I'm glad you did. Can I come in? She hesitated, then stepped aside. The townhouse interior confirmed his suspicions. Furniture from better times, photographs of children who'd grown up and moved away, the worn carpet of someone who couldn't afford to replace it. "I'm not here to cause trouble," James said, settling onto her couch. "I'm here to offer you a job." "A job?" "Christine trusts you. Tells you things. I need to know what she's planning, what she's worried about, what keeps her up at night." He pulled an envelope from his jacket. $10,000 now. $5,000 a month for 6 months. All you have to do is be her sister. Listen, remember, tell me. Bridget stared at the envelope like it might bite her. That's a lot of money. Consider it payment for years of being undervalued. Christine got millions in the divorce. What did you get? Debt and a sister who only calls when she needs someone to brag to. Her hand reached for the envelope, stopped. "Why are you doing this?" "Because she laughed when she took everything from me. Because Roger destroyed my career and called it business. Because I've learned that adequate men, when pushed far enough, become dangerous." James stood. "You don't have to decide now. But Bridget, your mortgage is 3 months behind. Your credit cards are maxed. How long before you lose this place?" He left the envelope on her coffee table and walked to the door. "James," she called as he reached for the handle. "What are you going to do to her?" "I'm going to give her exactly what she deserves," he said. "The question is, do you want to be collateral damage, or do you want to survive?" She called him that night and agreed. Chapter 6. The board is set. The medical testing at Riddle Pharmaceuticals took 3 weeks. Dr. Virginia Murphy, head of research, ran every scan, every analysis, mapping James's genetic code with the precision of a cartographer charting new worlds. "Remarkable," she said during one session, staring at screens of data. "Your body produces the protein naturally at rates we've never seen. We can synthesize a treatment from your plasma that could help all 847 current patients. Maybe more." "How many children?" James asked. "About 60% are under 18. The youngest is 6 months old." 6 months. James thought of Albert Riddle's daughter, dead at 10, and felt something shift in his chest. The money was life-changing, but this mattered. "When can you start treating them?" "We're in FDA approval now. 6 months, maybe 8. Your plasma is already saving lives, James. You should know that." Meanwhile, the trap was closing on Roger and Christine. Bridget proved invaluable. Every lunch, every phone call, every pillow talk confession, she remembered all. James learned that Christine was already planning her next upgrade. A house in the hills, $500,000, purchased with money from the Whitmore Media sale. "She's picking out furniture," Bridget reported during one of their weekly meetings. "Spending Roger's future like it's already in her account." Roger, meanwhile, was hemorrhaging cash. The gambling continued. Thursday nights at the Riverside, Friday nights, an underground poker club Frank's contacts had identified. Norwood Ventures collection letters had escalated. Roger's secretary had been dodging calls for weeks. James's third move was surgical. He bought Christine's dream house. Not under his name. Through another shell corporation, Redwood Holdings, he made an all-cash offer $20,000 above asking price. The sellers accepted within hours. Christine's realtor called her that same afternoon to deliver the bad news. Bridget reported the aftermath with barely contained glee. She threw her phone across the room, screamed for an hour, blamed Roger for not closing the Whitmore deal faster. "Good," James said. "Keep me updated." The Whitmore Media deal was his endgame. Frank had been digging, and what he found was beautiful in its simplicity. The deal was contingent on the firm showing consistent growth and ethical business practices. If Whitmore discovered fraud, creative accounting, stolen credit for campaigns, they'd walk away. James just needed proof. He found it in the firm's server, accessed through a backdoor that a talented hacker named Dale Benson had found for the right price. Roger's entire scheme was there. Emails reassigning James's projects, altered timesheets, fabricated client testimonials. Months of fraud, documented and time-stamped. "This is gold," Frank said, reviewing the files. "But how do you get it to Whitmore without revealing your hand?" James smiled. "We don't. We get someone else to." The anonymous tip to Whitmore Media's due diligence team came from a burner phone, untraceable. The email contained detailed allegations of fraud at James's former firm, complete with instructions on where to look in the company's server. Professional, concerned, devastating. Whitmore's lawyers descended on the firm 3 days later. Roger called an emergency staff meeting. Bridget learned about it from Christine, who was panicking. "He's terrified," Bridget reported. Christine, too. "Whitmore's auditors found something. They're investigating. Tell Christine you're worried about her," James instructed. "Be supportive. Let her trust you more." The next week, Norwood Ventures filed a lawsuit against Roger Clements for the $63,000 plus interest and legal fees. The summons was served at his office, in front of his staff, a public humiliation that made the local business news. Christine called Bridget that night, drunk and furious. "Everything's falling apart," she slurred. "The Whitmore deal might collapse. Roger's being sued. I spent too much on the house deposit, and now someone else bought it. What the hell is happening?" "Bad luck," Bridget suggested. "There's no such thing as luck. Someone's doing this." "Who would do this to you?" Christine's laugh was bitter. "I don't know, but when I find out, I'm going to destroy them." Bridget reported the conversation to James. "She's getting paranoid. Suspects someone's targeting them, but doesn't know who." "Perfect," James said. "Let's give her something else to worry about." He had Dale Benson create a fake social media profile. A beautiful woman named Cassandra, supposedly Roger's type. Cassandra sent Roger a friend request, started liking his posts, commenting with just enough flirtation to be noticed. Roger, predictable as sunrise, took the bait. Within a week, he was messaging Cassandra privately. Within 2, he was suggesting they meet. James forwarded the messages to Christine anonymously. The explosion was nuclear. Bridget called James that night, laughing so hard she could barely speak. Christine destroyed his car, took a golf club to his Porsche in the country club parking lot. Security had to pull her off. It's all over the club's social media. And Roger, denying everything, says it's fake. But Christine doesn't believe him. Bridget paused. "James, what's the endgame here?" "Justice," James said simply. Keep watching. Chapter 7. The House of Cards. The Whitmore media deal collapsed on a Wednesday. Their attorneys issued a statement citing irregularities in financial reporting and questions about ethical business practices. Translation: they found Roger's fraud and wanted no part of it. The firm's value plummeted overnight. Roger's promotion, his reputation, his future, all gone in a corporate press release that was 3 paragraphs of professional destruction. Christine called Bridget hysterical. $16 million gone? How are we supposed to? She stopped, catching herself. How is Roger supposed to recover from this? What about your settlement money? Bridget asked innocently. I spent it. Most of it. The deposits, the car, the country club fees. I thought the Whitmore money was coming. Her voice cracked. What am I supposed to do now? James listened to the recording Bridget had made and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no guilt. Just a cold certainty that this was exactly what Christine deserved. But he wasn't finished. Roger, desperate and cornered, made the mistake James had been waiting for. He tried to embezzle money from the firm to cover his gambling debts. Not much, $50,000 from the company's reserve account, covered with falsified vendor invoices. James had been monitoring the firm's finances through Dale Benson's access. The moment Roger made his move, James documented everything and sent it to the firm's board of directors. The vote to terminate Roger was unanimous. The criminal charges followed within days. Frank called James with the news. Roger's been arrested. Wire fraud, embezzlement. The DA is pushing for prison time. And Christine, she's lawyering up. Apparently, her name is on some of the bank transfers. The DA thinks she might be a co-conspirator. That wasn't part of James's plan, but he didn't try to stop it. Sometimes justice found its own way. The final piece fell into place when Bridget delivered her last report. Christine wants to see you, she said. James's hand tightened on his phone. What? She called me this morning. Said she needs to talk to you. She sounds broken. Did she say why? Something about mistakes and apologies. James, I think she's finally realized how bad things are. Tell her I'll meet her. Tomorrow. The coffee shop where we had our first date. Bridget hesitated. Are you going to hurt her? I'm going to tell her the truth, James said. That's worse. He met Christine at 2 p.m. on a Thursday, in the same corner booth where he'd nervously asked for her number 20 years ago. She looked different, smaller somehow, her expensive clothes hanging wrong, her makeup unable to hide the stress lines around her eyes. "James," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for coming." He said nothing, just watched her struggle for words. "I know I don't deserve your time. I know what I did was," she stopped, swallowed. "Roger and I are in serious trouble. The charges, the lawyers, it's all falling apart. I need help." "You need money," James corrected. "Yes." She couldn't meet his eyes. "I know I have no right to ask, but you were always generous, always kind. Maybe we could work something out. Alone. I could pay you back when—" "When what, Christine?" "When Roger gets out of prison. When you're acquitted of fraud. When a money fairy drops 16 million in your lap." She flinched. "You're right. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have." "You laughed," James said quietly. "When you called me that night. You told me I'd die alone and broke, and you laughed. Do you remember that?" "I was angry. I didn't mean—" "You meant every word. You spent a year planning how to destroy me. You and Roger gutted my career, took my home, drained my accounts. You called it winning." He leaned forward. "Did you win, Christine?" Tears ran down her face, ruining her mascara. "I made mistakes. I was stupid and cruel, and you were who you've always been. I just didn't want to see it." He stood to leave. "Please," she grabbed his arm. "James, I'm begging you. I'll lose everything." He looked at her hand on his arm, then at her face. For 17 years, he'd loved this woman, built a life with her, and she destroyed it all for money and the pleasure of watching him suffer. "Good," he said, pulling his arm free. "Now you know what it feels like." He walked out of the coffee shop and didn't look back. Chapter 8. Resurrection. 3 months later, James stood in Dr. Virginia Murphy's lab, watching the first patient receive treatment derived from his plasma. The girl's name was Abigail, Kentucky. She was 7 years old, her body ravaged by Herman's syndrome until she could barely walk. Her parents had exhausted every option, sold everything they owned to pay for experimental treatments that didn't work. Now she sat in a hospital bed, and 4-drip feeding James's synthesized antibodies into her system, while her parents held each other and cried. "The results are remarkable," Dr. Murphy said softly. "We're seeing improvement in 73% of trial patients. Real improvement, nervous system regeneration we thought impossible. How long until full FDA approval?" 3 months, maybe 4. Then we could treat everyone. She looked at him. "You're going to save hundreds of lives, James. Thousands eventually." He watched Abigail's mother smooth her daughter's hair, murmuring prayers of gratitude. "What about the money?" he asked. "The royalties? Based on current projections, you're looking at another 20 million over the next 10 years. More if the treatment proves effective for related disorders. $35 million. James tried to comprehend the number and couldn't. It was abstract, impossible, more money than he'd ever imagined existing in his reality. "I want to set up a foundation," he said, "for families who can't afford treatment. Full funding, no questions asked." Dr. Murphy smiled. "Albert said you'd do something like that. He's already had the lawyers draw up the paperwork. The Riddle Reed Foundation. Has a nice ring to it." Albert appeared in the doorway, as if summoned. "Talking about me?" "Only good things," James assured him. "Liar." Albert moved to the observation window, watching Abigail. "My daughter would have been 38 this year. Married, probably. Maybe grandchildren." He was quiet for a moment. "Because of you, this girl gets to have that future. You gave her what I couldn't give my daughter. You built the company that made it possible. We make a good team." Albert extended his hand. "Welcome to the board, by the way. The directors voted this morning. You're officially part of Riddle Pharmaceuticals leadership. I don't know anything about running a pharmaceutical company. You don't need to. You know about building things, about patience and precision and seeing the long game. We need that perspective." Albert's grip was firm, paternal. "You've been given a gift, James. What you do with it defines who you are." James thought about Christine and Roger. Their trials were next month. Fraud, embezzlement, enough charges to ensure years in prison. He could have pushed harder, made things worse. But watching them destroy themselves had been more satisfying than any revenge he could have orchestrated. "I choose to build," he said. Chapter 9. Adequate no more. 6 months after the plasma donation that changed his life, James stood in his new home. Not the mansion Christine had wanted, but a comfortable house in a good neighborhood with a yard big enough for the dog he'd always wanted, but she'd refused. Frank was helping him move in, arguing about where the couch should go. "It's too far from the TV," Frank insisted. "It's perfect. You just want it closer because you're going blind." "I'm not going blind. You bought a TV that's too small. It's 70 inches. Like I said, too small." James's phone rang. "Bridget, I thought you should know," she said. The sentencing was today. Roger got 8 years. Christine got 5. "Are you okay?" James asked. "I'm better than them. Better than I've been in years, actually. The money you paid me clear my debts. I'm going back to school, business administration. Figure it's time to build something of my own instead of watching other people succeed." "Good for you, James. Thank you for giving me a choice, for not lumping me in with Christine. You chose yourself. That's all anyone can do." After he hung up, Frank looked at him expectantly. "Well, Christine got 5 years. Roger got 8. Frank nodded slowly. "How do you feel?" "I don't know. Empty, maybe? I spent months planning their downfall, and now that it's happened, it just feels finished." "That's because revenge was never the point. You wanted justice. You wanted them to face consequences for what they did. That's different, is it?" "Yeah. Revenge is about hurting people because you're hurt. Justice is about balance, making things right." Frank settled onto the couch, in the wrong spot. James noticed, but didn't comment. "So what now?" "Now I live. I build the foundation. I work with the pharmaceutical company. I figure out who James Reed is when he's not someone's husband or someone's employee or someone's mark." "Sounds adequate," Frank said with a grin. James threw a pillow at him. The doorbell rang. Albert Riddle stood on the porch, holding a bottle of wine that probably cost more than James's first car. "Housewarming gift," Albert said. "May I?" "Please." They sat in the backyard as the sun set. 3 men who'd found unexpected friendship in unusual circumstances. Albert told stories about his daughter, about the company's early days, about the dozens of children whose lives James's blood had saved. "We got the latest results today," Albert said. "Abigail Kent is walking. Not just standing, not just a few steps walking. Her parents sent me a video. She's running around her backyard, laughing." James felt something catch in his throat. There are 42 other stories just like hers. Kids getting better, families getting hope. "Because of you," Albert raised his glass. "To James Reed, who proved that adequate men, when given the chance, are capable of extraordinary things." They drank to that. Later, alone in his new bedroom, James thought about the plasma donation that had started everything, about walking into that center with $40 worth of hope and walking out with a future he never could have imagined. Christine had been wrong. He hadn't died alone and broke. He'd been reborn, surrounded by people who valued him, doing work that mattered, building a life that was truly his. And somewhere in a prison cell, Christine was learning what it meant to lose everything. The symmetry was almost poetic. James's phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Murphy. Another success story. Another child responding to treatment. He read it, smiled, and set the phone aside. Tomorrow he'd go to the foundation office, review grant applications from families desperate for help. He'd meet with the Riddle Board, discuss expansion into research for related disorders. He'd live this impossible life that had been handed to him. But tonight, he'd sleep in his own home, in a bed he'd chosen, in a future he'd built from the ashes of his old life. Adequate? No, he was so much more than that. And he always had been. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.